podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. We did not make a chord out of our hellos.
This is our second start to the episode, and the first time we made a beautiful chord. Maybe we can like splice it into the the very end of the episode or something like that.
Right. Oh yeah, bonus if you listen to the end.
Yeah, we'll just like keep it in.
We'll see.
But yeah, we made a broken chord and we did it accidentally. And then I started saying before we got interrupted and had to restart our episode that Nicole, while you were away, we really did all the things that you keep us from doing, which is we talked about poop a lot. And then we also were very pie in the sky, super abstract, and just kind of
kept trying
floating
to
around,
pull it ourselves back down.
Yeah, somewhat successfully? Question mark.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're glad you're back. But we had a great time. But we're glad you're back.
That's good. I'm sorry that I missed it. I missed recording with you guys. I did not record last week because I had just come back from Ireland visiting my sister, which was very lovely. I got to hang out lots with my sister and her husband and their 2 kids, and other of her like extended family over there. Her in-laws came by and said hello, which was really nice. And we did some little excursions and stuff. So that was good. But I caught whatever cold they have. And so came back, and I've had this cold now for, I guess, 2 weeks. And it's to prove it, I just coughed for you. You're welcome.
Timing.
Just to prove, that I'm sick. And it's been, I mean, I went to the doctor, went to the clinic at work, and they were basically like she listened to my lungs and she was like, your lungs sound perfect. They sound amazing. I was like, okay, that's good, I guess. And she was like, yeah, we're not even going to test you for anything because like you're fine. So it really is just a cold, but it's really knocked me out. So I've just been kind of that. And I'm studying for, in 2 weeks from when we record this, I'll be doing my defending my dissertation. And so that is coming up. So you all can pray for me for that to go well, because it's been
a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming. It's been 6 years about since I started.
It's going to be so great. Once it's done
to get to
the
be
party.
Done.
Well, you might maybe claps for a little while first.
Something like this.
And then a party.
Yeah. And then a party. Yeah. That's the way to do it. That is the way to do it.
Yeah. Party maybe when my actual semester is done here at Belmont.
Yeah.
So. Right. Because you're also still teaching. So you're preparing for your defense and you're still teaching full time.
Yep.
That is a lot.
Yep. So
prayers.
But thankfully we have a break over Easter, 5 days. So that'll be helpful to kind of get me started in preparing and things like that. So
we do too, which is so cool. Like I guess in Canada, because I'm trying to think, I was like, I never went to a Catholic university when I was in Canada. There's not a lot of like, there's like seminaries where lay people can study, but there's not a lot of Catholic, just like Catholic.
There's Our Lady's Seat of Wisdom.
Right. That's right.
That's like the only one that I know of. Maybe there's other
like Catholic colleges like St. Jerome's or St. Mike's or
St. Paul's.
But like within a larger university.
Within a larger, but a lot of them are not really Catholic.
That's true.
Or they still follow like the university schedule of the larger university.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because I was like, wait, I went to St. Mike's, which is like Catholic college, but we never. Yeah, because you don't get Holy Thursday.
All of the U of Toronto
here. We get Holy Thursday off, which is like really nice.
Us too, and Easter Monday,
which is really lovely.
Nice. Yeah. I know it's Holy Week. I can't believe we're heading into Holy Week.
Seriously, which is why we're in the last session that we're about to get into with Salvifici Doloris, which is so exciting. But before we do that, I just wanted to circle back to something super important. Before we started recording, Nicole was talking about how she felt like a banana peel, and I just wanted to explore that for a minute, because I was like, wait, I love this, because this is how I often describe feeling like pancaked, like my brain feels like a pancake when I'm like so overwhelmed and just exhausted. But I love this banana peel image. Can you open this up for us, Nicole? What do you mean here?
Well, excuse me. I don't know, like, banana peels are kind of limp and they're they get all oxidized, so they've got like weird markings on them, and they're kind of sticky. And I don't know. Like, I mean all of these things analogously. I don't think I'm actually sticky right now. I'm not like a little kid with honey on my hands all the time or something.
Oh, that's like my
Although
worst
actually,
nightmare.
no,
But you're
actually,
a little snotty because
I am snotty. That's true. So there's the stickiness. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
You know.
But the other night, so you know, sometimes like when you have a cough, you can have like cinnamon and honey, and it like looks like a cough syrup. So I like it was like the middle of the night. I have like this thing of honey by my bed now, like mixed with cinnamon in like a little dish. So I like took a spoonful of it, and then I dropped a glop of it onto like my sheet. And so then I had to get out of bed and get a cloth and like wipe off this cinnamon honey. And thankfully it wasn't sticky, but I still haven't washed my sheet. So there's this like dark spot of like honey cinnamon. And that's maybe in a microcosm. Maybe gives you more insight into how I feel like a banana peel.
Yeah.
So I've been a very active banana peel. I've been doing a lot of work and stuff, but also a lot of reading Nancy Drew books when I need to help myself fall asleep and things like that. So
that's fun.
Oh, you know,
I haven't read Nancy Drew books in forever.
I know. I collected them when I was a kid, and they were at my parents' forever. And then I finally like reclaimed them and brought them back. So
what a fun thing we have in common. I totally did that also.
Yeah.
I had Babysitters Club. Those are the ones
I had those too. I used to get those from the library. So I didn't have my own collection of them. That was my library kind of indulgence. But loved those too.
Yeah, we totally had a Babysitters Club with me and two of my friends.
And that's so cute.
Yeah, because I was just turned 12 at the time.
Right.
So we did like a babysitting course, and then we had like, you know how Babysitters Club, they had their like little tote bags with their books and games.
Yeah, with their whole setup. Yeah, their
so we made that. Yeah, we each had one of those, and then it didn't really go very far. I'm not gonna lie. We weren't very organized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But that's it.
I feel like I don't know if we have where generationally our listeners are situated right now. If you're like solidly millennial, then you know what we're talking about. If you're Gen Z or maybe older, then maybe you don't know. But the Babysitters Club is just a very, very popular book series in the 90s. So 80s.
I mean, most of our listeners are between the ages of 23 and 34. Is the majority of them.
Okay.
I feel like if you're like in your 44. Early 30s, you would kind of get it. Probably. But definitely not our 23-year-old listeners who we love so much. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think
and
so.
Maybe
well, no, because
like older siblings.
Older siblings.
That is so true. There's a reboot of it.
There's a reboot?
So, yeah. But I think it's terrible. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's crazy is the original movie version of this had a young Rachel Lee Cook in it, who is, was then in She's All That, which has had somewhat of a resurgence now because of Netflix. So some people have Gen Zers know She's All That now because it's on online. Anyways, cultural news aside.
That's right.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end.
At the end.
Salvifici Doloris, which is wild.
Yeah.
So, okay, should we dive in?
Let's do
okay.
It.
So
I was gonna say let's dive in and then let's do it, and I said let's die, but I corrected very quickly.
But that's not what you meant.
So
that's okay. I mean, it's sort of appropriate. Let's die to ourselves. Holy week. I don't know.
Yeah,
you can make it work.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at the two chapters at the end. So chapter 7, which is the Good Samaritan, and then chapter 8, which is conclusion. So I don't know, does one of you want to give a little maybe summary of these sections for us, for our listeners?
Yeah, I could do it.
Yep.
So basically John Paul II turns to the parable of the Good Samaritan and talks about how like up until now we've talked about suffering, like what it is, where it comes from, and then in the suffering person, like what our kind of stance can be in suffering and where we can find Jesus and meaning in it ourselves when we are suffering. And so here he's like going to the other side of the coin, which is like when we're encountering somebody who is suffering. And so he's like stressing the responsibility to, like, I love it, where he talks about we're not allowed to pass by on the other side indifferently when we must stop beside him. So talking about being intentionally responsive to those who are suffering. And so he goes into some of that, and And then talks a little bit about how that happens in like institutions, like we have different organizations that respond to various ways of human suffering, but ultimately he kind of brings it down to the individual person, which makes up those kind of institutions and things like that. And then yeah, so that's the not the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan. That's the other one. Right, right.
Yeah.
And then it's the conclusion. So he's basically just kind of reiterating some of the things that he said in the other chapters and wrapping it up kind of with a call to, like, this was written in the year of redemption, which was 1984. So he's talking a little bit about that, and then the witness of Mary and the saints, and then he's asking, I'll read it at the end, I'm sure, because it's a really beautiful paragraph to close it, to those who are suffering. So, and then that's it. So that's what we're talking about this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a interesting moment in one of my seminars this week where we were talking about, it was like a seminar on philosophy, and it wasn't really actually about suffering, but we were talking about how like there are difficult questions that the church has to answer to, that sometimes we kind of, really simplify. And we've talked about this in many episodes of podcast. In this series we've for sure talked about it. But I feel like last time, Erin, you and I think everything that we said, I really resonated with and was real, but we really were kind of leaning into the redemptive aspect of suffering. And that's another thing, Nicole, like often when you're here, you kind of can check that, for me anyways, when you're like, no, but like this is an encounter. And we do go back, and we mentioned that in the last episode too, like there's both, it's an encounter with evil, but also there's this power. And you kind of, and Erin and I were talking about this last episode, you kind of have to have both, and to properly understand the power that comes from suffering, you have to understand first that it is an encounter with evil. Like there is something so devastating about it.
Right.
And so in this class, we were talking about how some people were very hesitant to sort of go into the redemptive dimension of suffering, because it can be dismissive of that, the first part of the sort of this is an encounter with evil. And I was thinking, in a certain sense, when we had in the letter the discussion of Job, when he talks about Job, because one answer to the question of suffering, right, that Christians can give is sort of the Job answer of, well, it's all within this greater plan of good. So like, it's okay, like suffering sucks, but like there is a bigger plan here. And the suffering that each of us or bad, poor people undergo or whatever, that is a piece that we just can't understand the whole picture. And so that's an answer. But that answer, and John Paul II, that is true. There's some truth in that. There is some truth in that, but it is not complete. It is not really satisfying to the person suffering. Was like, well, great. You just feel kind of instrumentalized almost. You don't feel, and I was thinking, and I don't want to talk forever here, but I just wanted to share this and get your guys' thoughts on this based on the Good Samaritan reflection that he does for us. But there's a way in which that answer really has to come from God. Like it has to be a God thing. Like it's not just like a human being being like, don't worry, there's a bigger plan here. Like there has to be an encounter with the presence of God. That's the only way that could ever actually really truly be reassuring. And it has to be about, in some ways, my suffering. Not that I can't say that to another person, but if I ever say that to another person, I feel like, this is just personal, I feel like I can only really say it from my own lived experience of that reality. That like, I am where you are, have been where you are. And all I can say is like, God is still real. He's here. He's with us. And I'm so sorry. But like, because I've lived it, I feel like sometimes I have the capacity and the words to express that there is a bigger plan here. But I am sometimes hesitant to ever say that. If I don't feel like I really can enter into this experience, I do stay away from the Job answer, because it's not adequate. It's not enough. And John Paul II says it here. It's Christ. It's Christ. And it's Christ crucified. It's not, there's more. So I think the Good Samaritan, I bring all this up because I was thinking the Good Samaritan is really about recognizing the suffering of others and responding appropriately to it. So I just wanted to sort of give that background again, that is also in this letter. Maybe as a little bit of a primer.
I think that's good, because I think that, the Good Samaritan is about somebody who goes and not only, I mean, I think of two stories from scripture, and this is one of these is not in this chapter, but Simon of Cyrene, right, who goes and suffers with Jesus, carries the cross with Jesus, which I think that's a good example of kind of co-suffering. But yeah, the Good Samaritan who is trying to alleviate the suffering, is trying to help this person who's suffering. And that's what we're called to do, is like, and it's very concrete. And he doesn't, nowhere in the story the Good Samaritan does the Samaritan ask, like, why do you think this happened? Or like, what's,
Yeah.
what, like, there's no like kind of philosophizing about it, or like trying to say like, oh, like, I'm sorry this happened to you, but you know what? There's a plan in this. Like, there's nothing of that. He just like tries to get him food and shelter and medicine.
Yeah.
And I think there is something really profound to that, of just this, like the corporal works of mercy, of just being like present to those who
Yeah.
are suffering. And I'm reminded of our series on Cry of the Heart, right? Of like co-suffering, and we're not called to be God for people. We're not called to try to most of the time give any kind of answers, but just to co-suffer with, and to listen to the questionings that people have, and to just like question with them. And so I think that's
Yeah.
There's a line I just want to point to, which kind of connects with what you just said, Nicole. It's part of paragraph 20, I think, or yeah, I think it's like the second paragraph of 28. It says the parable of the Good Samaritan belongs to the gospel of suffering, for it indicates what the relationship of each of us must be towards our suffering neighbor. And this is the line he says: we are not allowed to pass by on the other side indifferently. We must stop beside him. So I think there's a way in which the answers, in quotes, to suffering, trying to give sort of answers, is a way of kind of entering a path of indifference. It's a way of kind of closing the questioning off and saying, to kind of siloing the suffering in some way to a safe, answerable realm, where sometimes it's an expression of indifference. I think, I'm not always, but just sometimes.
I think, and it's like, I think when we talk about suffering being an evil, like an experience of evil, right, and how we recoil from that, it's not just when we personally experience suffering, but often it's when we experience the suffering of others, because it's still an encounter with evil, even if it's that person most directly encountering it. And it's like I feel like it's that, that part of us sometimes that gets, like, I feel it all the time, that it's like we hesitate to get involved in other people's stuff, or to like, because there's a part of us, I think, that fears, like, oh my gosh, if I insert myself here, then I'm never going to be able, like, and I'm responsible for this person, I'm responsible for and like, what if it's too much? What if it's like, what if it breaks me? What if I can't do what they like? There's like, it brings us all these insecurities, I think, in us too, about what that person might even need. But it even makes me think, because it says, after what you read, the stopping does not mean curiosity, but availability.
Yeah, right.
And that's like,
so important.
and that I
that's
feel
key,
like
isn't it?
yeah, and it's like such a beautiful thing to think about, that like, it's not just curious, like, it's not just somebody's a sideshow and we're observing their pain, whatever, but like availability to like enter into the pain of another person with them in whatever capacity we have. But also there is a risk to that. There's a risk to that, like, that he talks about in other parts of it, where he's talking about the suffering person is not always a delight, is basically what he's saying. Like, sometimes the suffering person is just an idiotic jerk. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Because really, like, when you're super suffering and experiencing a lot of pain, like, sometimes you just don't have the wherewithal to be gracious about it, and so then it's even, there's like, we face this risk to ourselves of entering into this place where we ourselves can be potentially become abused, in a sense, by a person who's suffering, and not in the typical way, I think, that we would talk about abuse, but that we can
be hurt by them.
We can be hurt, like, we could
or
be
annoyed, or
or not responding, or overburdened by, or like all of those kind of things. But it also strikes me too that, like, if we're thinking about the Good Samaritan, like, he brought the guy to an inn, paid for stuff, and then left.
Yeah.
He
He
didn't
didn't do everything.
he
Yeah.
didn't do everything.
Right.
He didn't stay with them to, care for them
Yeah.
and like all
There
those
was a
kind of
certain
things.
capacity,
Yeah,
maybe we would call it boundaries or
right.
whatever,
Yeah.
that he was
Yeah. And it's really like it's like
following.
I feel like it's like there's a plan for our own suffering that the Lord has. Like the things that he allows us to bear that we, can offer up whatever and participate in this economy of redemption. But I feel like there's also definitely a plan for our own entry into the suffering of another person, right?
Yeah.
Like, which is why it's essential to have this
Yeah.
solid relationship with the Lord and this docility to the Holy Spirit to really see like,
Yeah.
Lord, like what is
My
my
role
place
here.
here? When do I need to involve other people? When is it like
Yeah.
when is my own mental health or whatever? Like
Mhm.
it gets into practical stuff too, right?
Yep. And I think that's really important because, like, as we read this, and this is the line that you say, we're not allowed to pass on by the other side indifferently. We must, and then in quotes, stop. And he's not talking necessarily of this, like, um, I think first what's important is it's not necessarily literal, right? We
Right.
don't always have the ability or the capacity to physically stop in front of every single person who is suffering. Otherwise, we would
Right.
stop in front of every single person,
Everyone.
right? Because everyone's
Exactly.
suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And so, but I think it's like how can we avoid being indifferent to those who we encounter, whether it's, and I think that we maybe classically think of, like, I don't know, somebody who is experiencing homelessness and is sitting on the side of the road
Yeah.
or something. And maybe what it means to stop is not necessarily, maybe it's sometimes actually to stop and have a conversation with that person. Maybe sometimes you're a woman walking alone at night and you're going to be prudent and not stop, but you're going to smile at the person, or you're going to
Mhm.
pray as you walk by in your heart, so that you're not indifferent. There is a
Yeah.
pause of the heart, but right. So I think what you're saying, Erin, that this discernment
Yeah.
is really key. Or
Mhm.
I can think of cases where somebody yeah, maybe there is somebody who's suffering and they're difficult to love, right? Because they're in pain or whatever. And maybe there are people who are called to love that person and remain present. And then maybe sometimes there are people who are called to have some healthy boundaries with that person, and love them in a different way, like through their prayers,
Yeah.
or love them through their boundaries with the person, right? Maybe
Yeah.
that, so I think
Mhm.
we have to be careful. um I think we have to allow ourselves, like, as I read this, I'm allowing myself to be really challenged by it, to be like, do I actually have this attitude? Do I
Mhm.
actually stop? Also, as I'm just,
Yeah.
like, talking, the chair that I'm sitting in keeps slowly rolling back and I keep having to pull it
Excellent.
back up. Anyways, here we go.
It's just like a
It's like
dramatic,
those
like
funny,
visual,
yeah,
like out.
they're all
Yeah,
just fading
If
into
I
the
keep
that's
background.
right.
shrinking and
Yeah,
then
we got
going
a big
bigger,
budget,
that's
everybody.
why.
So we're putting in cinematic effects now.
That's right.
So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, so that, and and prudence and discernment,
Hmm.
and, like,
Well, and he
following the Holy
does say
Spirit.
that it's always there can be a responsive prayer and compassion, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't, sometimes we might think we know what the response to something is, or that it has to be something of like action in the sense of like directly doing something for that particular suffering in itself.
Right.
But sometimes it is true that the Lord is calling us to pray for things. I found
yeah.
honestly that having a list on my phone now of things that I'm praying for is so helpful because I
Hmm.
actually don't forget about it that way.
Yeah.
And the second thing is it helps me to remember what people are suffering so I can like ask them about like how so and so, or
Yeah.
Hmm.
which is good.
Yeah.
And then the third thing also is like you can see how the Lord moves sometimes, like when he's answering prayers or he's like
Yes.
moving in some way. But it's like even that, like if I can't do anything else, I can always do that.
Yes. Yeah. I also think that like there's a way to recognize, to not be indifferent by recognizing that there isn't so much of a difference between me and that other person in
Mm.
general. Just kind of walking and
Yeah.
living in the world with the reality that I am me and I have been given these particular circumstances as my blessings and my crosses, and I have to, make I have to respond to the Lord the best I can with what he has given to me. I have that responsibility, but that's what I was given by graciousness and goodness of God. And in that same graciousness and goodness, he has given another person a totally different set of circumstances. And I don't want to be like, well, that could have been me. It's not random. And God chose me for the particular path that I'm on. And he chose somebody else for a different path. But the suffering that other person that are entailed in that path, I mean, God did not desire for them to suffer those evils, obviously. Like this is the paradox where God, has chosen for each of us this, like, the goodness of life. And but for all of us, we encounter evil in different ways. God knows how we're going to encounter them. He doesn't want us to suffer in those ways, but that he does know, and he, in his permissive will, that's what happens. So when I see somebody else and I see, okay, God chose what I was given to me for me, but I didn't choose it. Like I didn't get this by my own making. And in a certain sense, I don't know how this other person has gotten to where they are and what their culpability or anything like that is. But I just kind of, my like just random thought is like, that could have been me. Like that could have been me. And I know, especially when I look at people who are homeless, I often think this because I used to live in Hamilton, Canada, where there's a decent population of homeless folks over there. And I remember one time I was driving to work and there was a woman who was like, had her cardboard thing out and she was asking for money. And she looked my age. Like I'm in my 30s, and she looked sort of a little bit haggard and obviously had a distressed type of look because her clothes and everything. But in general, I could identify that this woman and I were probably not that far apart in age.
Yeah.
And I was looking at her and I was thinking, I kind of just went through my head of, there are just a few things potentially separating me from that type of situation. I have a support system in my family, a very, very healthy one. I've been given the gift of sort of financial stability in general through many factors, and my faith, first and foremost, all these things. And I don't know what this woman's story is, but I just know, I'm like, I don't know where I would have been had it not been for these blessings. And there's a way you can do that where you're sort of like, well, I'm so glad that that's not, and I think it's more like, I see you and I see how that could have easily been me. And that just brings out in me a kinship, I guess. I feel more connected to people in general. Cause I'm like, yeah, but for the grace of God, that could have been me, and and I trust that God is giving her the graces to the degree she's open to live out. But then I feel like I'm able to pray better for that woman.
Well, and it draws out, like, it's drawing out goodness in you, in a sense, right? Like I love right at the beginning of 29 where he says, following the parable of the gospel, we could say that suffering, which is present under so many forms in our human world, is also present in order to unleash love in the human person. That unselfish gift of one's eye on behalf of other people, especially those who suffer. The world of human suffering unceasingly calls for, so to speak, another world, the world of human love. And in a certain sense, man owes to suffering that unselfish love which stirs in his heart and actions. But I love that. Like, like the person who is a neighbor cannot indifferently pass by the suffering of another, like regardless of what form of response we're called to have, that suffering is present in order to unleash love in the human person, right? And the only way that it unleashes love is when we have an open heart, is when our heart is open to the suffering of another person and is not like blind to it, or is not scared off by it. I mean, enough to like flee, even if there is some fear in us,
I can recently, well, I forget when this was exactly, but sometime in the last few months, Nathan had whatever cold, and when he gets sick for like one day or something, and then I get sick for like 3 weeks, but whatever, it's fine. Anyway, but so he was sick, and I think it was like a Saturday or something, and so I was like, he was like just in bed, and so I was like bringing him whatever soup and snacks and stuff, and it was like, of course I love my husband, but it was like when he was sick, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like I just really felt for him because he was sick, and I just like, so I wanted to take care of him and like help him, and at one point, like, he looked at me, he's like, you just really love me, and I'm like, yeah, and then we've had the flip situation, right, where I'm sick, and then he's like trying to take care of me and like bring me like a hot water bottle when I'm coughing or different things, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, she really loves me. And he's like expressing that, right? So it's like neither of
That's
us
so
like being
beautiful.
sick, but it is so interesting that when we are sick, it does draw out the love of the other person in a unique way and remind that person who's sick that they are really loved. And there is
Yeah.
something really beautiful about that only suffering can do, seemingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that same section, I mean, so he moves from, the Good Samaritan parable to that section. There's a section on um the
Oh yeah, the where if you did it to me,
yes,
Mm,
as you
yes,
did to the least of these, you did
you
it to
did it
me.
to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting because I mean that was like Mother Teresa's whole thing.
that's
That was
right.
We talked about
Her
that in an
five
episode
fingers,
about
right? You did
yeah,
it
yeah,
to me. Yeah.
yeah. And she really, I mean, I would encourage people, if you're interested, to listen to, I think it was last Lent. It was last year during Lent that we did
Yeah.
a little saint series, like
Right.
exemplars. And she was one of them that we did. And I think I shared this story about her
Because
encountering
Advent
Christ. Oh,
exemplars.
okay. Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. But not this past Advent, because we did Cry of the Heart this past
Right.
Advent.
So
So this would be,
2022
yeah,
Advent? Yeah.
season
Mm.
three, our
Right.
Advent episodes. Yeah, just I would just encourage you guys to listen to the one on Mother Teresa, because
Yeah.
yeah, that's really her. I mean, it wasn't sort of a lens or like a metaphor or something.
Mm.
She truly encountered the
Yeah.
Lord in the people that she met and served. And it was urgent for her. Like because
Yeah.
I think she suffered that dark night for so many years. In many ways for her, um she really met Jesus, really really met him in
And
every
you're suffering for
person
it.
that
Yeah.
he brought into her path, and she really treasured, she deeply treasured that. And it's kind of interesting because I've thought about this. It's like the person is not instrumentalized like as a sort of like conduit to Jesus or something.
Mm.
It's I only really
Mm,
actually meet Jesus in the person if I actually meet the person. Like it's
mm.
that particular person. It's not just the poor person in general.
Yeah.
It's like this particular person, this particular friend. And I love throughout this passage, I mean, John Paul II talks
Mm.
about suffering people, which is all of us, as neighbors. Like this is my neighbor.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
this again is like an identification with, we are of the same home, we are of the same community. Um, and I'm meeting you on our
Mm-hmm.
street in a certain sense. Like this is
Right.
Yeah.
something we belong to together. And
Mm-hmm.
it's only when I really meet that person that I meet the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like
Yeah.
through a person who's
Yeah.
suffering, Jesus is like hiding behind them somewhere. It's like
Yeah. And
both
it's
and.
cumulative too, like
Yeah.
the like he says in the messianic program of Christ, which is at the same time the program of the kingdom of God. Suffering is present in the world in order to release love, in order to give birth to works of love toward neighbor, in order to transform the whole of human civilization into a civilization of love.
Yeah.
But like that's exactly what it is. Like when we are seeing that person, like this particular person, and loving this particular person,
Yeah.
all of those things together, it's what
This
creates a
changes.
civilization of love.
Yes,
Like it
yes.
Yeah.
changes the whole
Because
landscape of
virtue
human.
only happens when you practice it, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's like I think parenting, it's like automatic suffering, right? Because you're loving these little
Yeah.
humans and they're always being being
Needy.
kids, right? Being
Yeah.
needy and being
Hmm.
dirty and
Yeah.
messy and
Hmm.
sick and whatever. And so you're always having to take care of them. And like that shapes parents into, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
like virtuous people, beautiful people.
Yeah. And it's like both of those things together. Like also, there's like so many good things that I love in here that I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah. At one and the same time, Christ has taught man to do good by his suffering and to do good to those who suffer. In this double
Mm,
aspect, he has completely revealed the meaning of suffering. This is like a good
mm,
reminder too that it's like that there is a double aspect to it for each of us, to
Yeah.
know how to offer our own sufferings or how to find
yeah.
Christ or like the meaning of our own sufferings, but also to do good to those who suffer, and that they're like inextricably linked.
Yeah.
But they really are, because the thing is, I mean, I think all of us on the podcast for sure I know that all of us have experienced it because we walked with each other through these types of experiences. But when you go through an incredibly challenging cross, it is almost, it just, the fruit of that is an such an increased compassion for others who
Yeah.
like I think for me it's almost like a general experience that where I've gone through something challenging of a particular type, a particular kind, that has just opened me up to the true challenge of many different crosses. Like I may not know the particulars of a you know, the cross of a sickness, or the cross of unemployment, or the cross of these kinds of things, but because of the cross that I've gone through. And Sister Miriam Heidland said this, like, you know, our particularity often opens us up to universality. Like it's very it's like, but I can't read my situation onto another person's, but oftentimes I find looking at that situation, hearing them speak of the challenge, I'm like, oh, I can understand to some degree. There's now a deeper connection with your pain because of my pain. And it's so natural. Like I've noticed that is just a natural opening, that when you live your cross, you try to live it with the Lord. He just makes your heart more softer, more pliable, more open. And you're not even doing anything. You're just doing the thing of the living your suffering out, you know?
Yeah.
But with him. Because the other thing that can happen is if you live your suffering not with him, it's the opposite. You start to become you can become closed in and resentful, you know, and not open, basically. There was one other thing with the Good Samaritan that I wanted to kind of highlight, which is when he talks about, he connects the Good Samaritan with Gaudium et Spes, and the idea of making, you know, a man can only gain himself by making a true gift of himself. Like he only gets himself by making a true gift of himself. And I was thinking about that in connection with, so another thing that happened in one of my seminars today, actually, we were talking about St. Gregory the Great has a maxim about charity really has to involve another. Like it's very, so there's obviously, you know, today we talk a lot about self-love, and that's a thing. And you do have to, it's good to love yourself, but you can't actually love yourself. You are, first of all, given, you know, you are born in relationship already, always and already, like right from the very beginning. So your own sense of yourself comes from another, you know, in a certain sense. So it's like the other is always involved somehow in our experience of ourselves. And I was thinking this Gaudium et Spes piece and the Good Samaritan parable really, I think, highlights the truth that, I can't actually love myself well. So I must love the other as myself. But the paradox is I can only really even fully know myself when I love the other. Like there's only, again, inextricable. Like I come to myself in my love for the other, and I must love myself more as I do that. And then that helps me love the other more as well. So it's
Because, and I think there's something really, like, if we think about self-esteem as a concept, right? And self-esteem grows through action, right? And so it's like when you are active in your life and doing things that serve others, or you're practicing a skill that brings beauty to the world, or whatever it is, you start to realize that there's something good in this. And then you can love yourself, right? So it's like, it is like the love of the self, or the esteem for oneself, grows through charity to others, right? And focus on others. So
for some reason, the motto of Sister Wives, Kate, I don't know if you remember the show Sister Wives, the beginning, the like intro, my mom and I used to watch it, and the intro was like, I believe that love should be multiplied, not divided. Anyways, so
Sister Wives.
But in this case, it's true that the Lord in Jesus, in this way, love becomes, it's like as soon as you, I mean, I think we've all experienced that, right? Like as soon as you give like a gift of yourself somehow, it's like it becomes this blessing that's like multiplied for other people, for you, like, you know, and when we sacrifice ourselves, there is even if it's even if sometimes it's hard to see or experience, but a lot of times the Lord gives that consolation of like, oh, you've given yourself in sacrifice, and there's like consolation for you in that, just as much as there is for other people, you know?
I there's Eric Mall. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He founded the missionaries, I think they're called Missionaries of Mercy or something, but anyways, he started this movement of missionaries who take a year where they minister to homeless people. And I think at least on the men's side of it, they actually sometimes they live in shelters with homeless folks and like they live that life. And he did that first. I believe now he's married and he has children and stuff, but for a while he was a hermit, and he kind of did this as sort of to try to learn how God wanted him to do this ministry. And the Lord really guided him very particularly through that experience. But he would talk about how he would live in shelters with people and try to love them and preach the gospel sometimes. And he's very, I mean, if you hear him speak, he's so articulate and just a very lovely person. So I imagine he would have been that way in in quotes, preaching the gospel. Like not, he wouldn't have been rudimentary about it, but very particular about it. Anyways, and he would say, like, even when just doing nice, saying kind things to people or being kind to them, oftentimes he would get real vitriol back from these brothers that he was living with in these shelters.
Yeah.
And for him, so speaking of consolation, there was a huge consolation in that experience where he just was like, okay, I am just experiencing a taste of what the Lord always in a way experiences, because the Lord is always loving us, like all of us, right? And how often do we reject him? How often do we not even realize or notice or care or whatever? And he didn't feel it was just for him an experience of that, of God's love for us and ultimately of God's love for him. So it just made him grow so much deeper in gratitude, because he just realized more and more how much God loved him. So even when the other is not able to give us, in quotes, the satisfaction of, a thank you or something, and there is something that's left wanting in the experience of giving ourselves, there is a way sometimes which God really can transform even that, so just
it's beautiful.
He's cool.
He's cool.
Well,
final thoughts.
It's good. I mean, I feel like now I'm like, good, this was a good intro. Now I'm going to go back and actually like read it again more deeply,
I know. Listen, I've read it like 8 times, and then and I only say that because I did part of like my thesis stuff on it. There's like a reason why I had to read it so many times.
Yeah.
And even still, when we were reading through it this time, I was like, "Whoa, this says this? What the heck?"
Yeah, right.
I didn't even know.
It's so good.
But here, okay, so why don't I read the last
sure,
the last
conclusion
paragraph
there.
here? Yeah. So this is like especially for those who are suffering, or maybe if you know somebody or close to somebody who's suffering a lot, then you could pass along this kind of tidbit to them. So John Paul II says, and we ask all of you who suffer to support us. We ask precisely you who are weak to become a source of strength for the church and humanity. In the terrible battle between the forces of good and evil, revealed to our eyes by our modern world, may your suffering in union with the cross of Christ be victorious. To all of you, dearest brothers and sisters, I send my apostolic blessing.
That's beautiful.
That's so epic.
It's a missioning,
I know, right?
Yeah,
it is.
It is a battle. Like this kind of language just fires me right up. Like,
I know, right?
Battle.
Totally is.
Good and evil. It's Lord of the Rings.
Totally
It's
is
happening.
Right.
Yep.
It's the real battle. This is the real battle.
Yeah. I mean, why else does the evil one want to come and help, turn us away from our sufferings, or turn us away from those who are suffering, or
help us eliminate all of those who are suffering, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh
That's exactly it. Yeah.
These are the powerful ones of the world. Not to
yes,
again.
But
no, I know.
It's that balance, right? It's that tension, but it's there's something there, right? There's something really real.
There is a call, like that's a calling, that paragraph is a calling. And I just saw this video. I mean, we got to get going. I know we need to get into God Wings, and I don't know if we know who's doing God Wings today. I guess one of us will volunteer. We'll get a God Wink in a second. But I saw this random YouTube video that just popped up on my feed the other day of this woman who died she didn't die from pancreatic cancer. She had pancreatic cancer. It was terminal. And I don't know whether she was in the States, in a particular state where it's legal. I didn't think it was legal anywhere here. So she might have been in Canada.
Oh, it is. No, they're a couple states.
Colorado.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I know that. I think one of the Virginias was looking into it, and I don't know what happened with that. But anyway, so she in Canada, it's called medical assistance in dying, which is just insane because it's euthanasia basically. But yeah, she was talking. It was the day that she took the drugs, like the euthanizing drugs. She came online, and the video is called like My Last Hours. And she was just talking about how she had a few more hours, and she was I really felt for her. She was so joyful at the love that she was experiencing from her family. it was interesting towards the end of the video, she got really tearful because she was like realizing what she had chosen, what was about to happen. And she seemed, if you can use this word, like somewhat at peace with her choice, you know, but it was it was just so deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
And also like I felt so much for this woman. You know, she just wanted to leave in a certain sense in peace, you know, and I get that. I do. I mean, you kind of understand that, but it's just it's misses this whole call. Like, no, your life is a gift. Even in the suffering, which is awful and totally an encounter with evil, there is a gift there to be given. There is a gift to be given and a gift to be received.
And I think that there can be peace, right? There can be actually the peace that surpasses understanding in the midst
Yes.
of the of suffering.
So
Which
we're
is totally
really
why.
called.
Yeah, we are. And I
Like,
totally think that the Lord is like raising up people and like witnesses in the church who are like revealing the like the radicalness
Yeah.
of this call. And even more and more I've been seeing like books coming out on suffering and people talking, and like there was a different webinar I think Endow did on Salvifici Doloris, and like all of these things that it feels like it might just be I'm seeing suffering every because whatever we're talking about suffering, but I really do think that it's
Yeah.
becoming kind of more and more like a question and a, you know, because
Right.
the Lord is calling us to enter into this, like into this understanding and this dynamism of gift, like understanding the human person as a gift and being able to proclaim that to the world regardless of the situation of the person.
yeah. And
Absolutely.
and it's not there's lots of pockets where this message is needed because it's not intelligible. It's hardly intelligible anymore. Like what we're talking about here is not something, I mean, everybody who's listening to us, I think more or less is Catholic or Christian or interest, you know, we have some Christian, some non-Catholic Christian listeners, but we're all kind of working with the paradigm of the love of Christ. But outside
it's the
of
cross
that,
is foolishness, right?
exactly.
The cross is foolishness for those who have not encountered the Lord.
It really is. And more the cross has disappeared from the public space and people don't know. And so it's like these choices are what are being made in the world, and what we're speaking of is becoming less intelligible. So it really requires life lived out, like witnesses living this to make it intelligible again. You know? So
absolutely.
Amen.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us this Lent in this journey, or maybe you're listening to this after Lent, whenever you are listening to this, but for reading this beautiful and important document. Thanks for coming alongside of us. And
are we doing a God wink? Do we have a God wink?
I don't mean I have a God wink.
I can share a God wink. This is like my today of this is like a meta God wink. We always have
nice.
We have it once in a while.
Fun.
But I've been not feeling great, but I've been working and just trying to trust that the Lord is going to give me what I need, like every day trying to trust. And I just did not sleep well last night. It took me forever to fall asleep, and then I was awake for in the middle of the night and I was coughing and whatever. So I got to work this morning and I look on my calendar and I'm like, okay, I have like 7 meetings. And I was just like, okay, like that's it. Like it was meetings that had been rescheduled from last week because I did take kind of like a sick day a week ago. So I was like, I can't cancel these meetings again. I just have to do it. So I got to work and I did the meetings, and then I did the morning stuff. And then I looked at my afternoon calendar and I had 4 meetings in the afternoon, and then 2 of them just canceled. And happened to be, I had 4 meetings in a row, and it was the last 2 meetings of the day that both canceled, which meant I only had 2 meetings back to back early in the afternoon. And then I could come home and I can rest and get ready for my, many meetings tomorrow, and we could record this podcast.
And we could record. Yeah.
So just grateful. It's like, okay, yeah, the Lord's providing for me. He knows what I need.
That's
and today he could have given me the grace to get through. I literally took a nap under my desk today, or I tried to, because I had to.
Girl.
I couldn't, and I just,
man.
But then he could have given me the grace to get through this afternoon in a different way. But this is what happened. So I'm grateful.
Praise the Lord.
So,
amazing.
That's my Praise the Lord.
Yes. Well,
and we'll talk to you all next time when it's Easter.
Was it?
Oh my
gosh. Is next week our season finale?
I get we have to talk about that,
We
but
have to
I
talk
think
about
so.
We'll see.
We're
Well,
gonna
anyway,
have 1 to 2 more episodes.
This year's been like
we're winding
so
down.
fast.
I think all of us have been, this has been a really intense few months for all of us. So it's just been like,
It's been crazy.
We're lucky to be getting podcast episodes out every week, kind of squeaking them out under the.
Squeaking them out is right. But it's like so funny because, we're just now telling you guys, we're just having a conversation. You guys are just here.
Yeah.
It's not even, but like, really, truly, I think these talking about suffering always help, especially when it's difficult, because we have to make time and it's so hard, like squeaking out these episodes. But then every time we sit down and have these conversations, it's always so helpful for me to be doing the things that are making it hard to squeak out these episodes. So I'm
it's good.
Amen.
Amen. All right.
God bless you all.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Hello.
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 Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.